Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. A good one, I hope. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV Sticks, Roku and Roku Sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk is joining me, David Morassutti, and a very special guest, Ben Brown. Ben, welcome to the program for the first time. You're a rookie here, but you are by no stretch of the imagination a rookie when it comes to the Canadian Football League.
I'll have to correct you there, Frank. It was Ben Grant.
Ben Grant, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No worries, and thank you. Thanks
I
for the welcome.
apologize. I'm thinking about somebody else. We have Eduardo's. I had a guy that I worked with here at CFL was Ben Brown, and it was just automatic. But anyway, I apologize for the difficulties I had with my computer. A little hectic getting in here. So here it is. First of all, Ben, let's talk about your background. Who's Ben Brown? Where does he come from? What does he do? I'm very interested.
I got to correct you again, Frank. Ben Grant. No worries.
Grant,
no worries.
I got it.
I'm gonna write it up here.
You have to write. You have to put it on your. You have to put it on your. I'm not having a good day here. Sorry, I'm very frustrated with my computer and stuff.
No worries. No worries at all. So my quick backstory is, I've been around football my whole life, but really got sort of more seriously into it when I started coaching about 17 years ago, and I've been coaching some high school and semi-pro, and really I just kind of felt like there was a gap. As I'm sure you guys have too, in a lot of mainstream media coverage in the CFL, but more specifically with regards to the Toronto Argonauts. And so a few years ago, a few coaches and myself started up X's and Argos, which the goal of that was just to basically provide a little bit more Argos coverage. So that's my backstory in a nutshell, I guess.
It's very similar to mine. I was part of a fan group. So I can understand. And in the fan group, I realized we didn't really have much that was dedicated strictly to the Toronto Argonauts. In all due respect to everything else out there, it just wasn't stuff that talked about football here in Toronto in particular. And I'm talking some 10 years ago. So, so the same as you, I felt I was trying to fill a void that was there. David, your reasoning for doing this, but of course, you work for Sportsnet, so there's an ulterior motive that for you. It's not as pure as mine and Ben's motive. You're making a living.
Well, the funny thing is, so a few years ago, before I even started my journalism career, I was provided the opportunity to go and cover the Argonauts because, again, I like CFL football, which might sound surprising for someone my age. And I was just like you guys, there wasn't a lot of people writing about the Argonauts, right? So kind of in the same way, I said, okay, I'm given the opportunity to go and cover this team, and I'll take it. The Argonauts coverage is separate from what I do from Sportsnet. I try to add in CFL when I can to the Sportsnet coverage, but the Argonauts are a separate thing I do on my own because, again, there's no one else really, as you guys have mentioned, no one's really doing it on a day-to-day other than like Frank Ziccarelli of the Toronto Sun. He's the most constant mainstream media person there. So it came to the point where it's like, okay, someone else has to kind of bring a little bit more. And that's why when I finally got to meet Ben, it's nice to have a pure Argonauts, let's say pure Argonauts media member to sit beside me at the press box and not someone from,
another place.
Yeah. Or just covering another team. It's nice to have someone that's focused on the Argonauts, and him and I, for the first game, we sat beside each other and we kind of looked at each other as we were doing the press conferences to see who's going to steal each other's questions, which is always the fun in that. And kind of a first to do the Zoom calls in the press box,
and the coverage to this point now, it's like there is coverage now, like with all of these outlets that Frank, you've talked about, and David, you've talked about. You do have to look a little bit, and I think fans are getting better at knowing where to find that coverage. And so any Argos fan any week, they say, okay, I want to listen to something, or I want to watch something, I want to read something. they have kind of learned now where to get it. But like my thing from the beginning is, once I feel like there is enough mainstream coverage, then I'm gonna stop. That's like I don't know, not to put myself in the Mary Poppins role, but like the hope is that at some point someone will take over, and then I don't have to do this, and I can sit back on my couch. It's much easier to just sit back and enjoy the games and everything else. But until that time, I'll keep doing what you guys are doing, and trying to provide what I can in some sort of outlet for Argos fans and CFL fans.
Let's be clear. There is a responsibility that we take on, whether it's just in support of the league, or whether we're working. In the case of David's soft pedaling himself. David's becoming, because of his continuous covering and being at Argos games and CFL, press conferences and such. The fan and Sportsnet companies, he's starting to get a reputation. I'm going to toot your horn, David, since you won't toot it, so I'll toot it. Maybe I'll call you. No, I won't. You're being asked to discuss and to answer questions about the Canadian Football League because, quite frankly, at Sportsnet, there are a couple of people that do and are very high profile, granted, but the regular, I'm going to try and explain it this way. The regular fan interest in deep week to week understanding of the Argos, you're not as elevated as maybe some of the other people at Sportsnet that are looking at it from a more of a bigger picture, league wide, as opposed to the Argos. So when the conversation gets to the Argos, I say the same thing about Ben Grant. I'm going to call him David Grant for today so that I don't forget the Grant name. Where you guys are specializing in a way that I appreciate. For me, it was the same thing. I was trying to offer a voice about the Argonauts, and you're right. When I started doing this, there were never mind the Argo podcast. There weren't many podcasts, period. So for me, it was an opportunity to make up for the fact that David referred to. Back then, the Star was more deeply involved than they are today. The National Post was more involved than they are today. I'm not trying to throw bricks at them, but the fact remains, newspapers aren't as deeply involved now as they used to be because of the way newspapers are. So people like you, Ben, I want to personally thank you for doing what you do, simply because you're another voice about the game that we all care about and love. And I maybe I shouldn't say that on everybody's behalf, but I think we all care about the league deeply. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for doing it from a perspective where it's actually an expertise about the game. So you offer another level that is not something that we're accustomed to hearing. So thank you for that. And thank you for being on the program. And thank you for putting up with my inability to say your name right. It's Grant.
No worries. And I appreciate that. And I think, one of the things that I felt like when we started this, my co-host JB and myself, we kind of looked at it and we thought, well, we can maybe do something that isn't being done. And that's a little bit of the X's and O's. And, that's an area that we have some sort of expertise in. And so we can try and take that on. But it took a little while. There was an adjustment period because I know when we first started, it was our first year, most of the pieces we did, nobody wanted to watch or read or listen to because we went in a little bit too heavy. I think the first piece I did was like 55 minutes on cornerback stances or something like that. And it was I watched it back and I was like, I can't imagine anyone wants to watch this. And so it took a little while, and I've kind of played around with it to a point where it's now sort of for, fans that like going to the games, that like watching the Argos, but now they say, you know what, I wouldn't mind learning a little bit more about football. And they may not have played any football at any point. They may just want to know something really basic. And a lot of our pieces are sort of geared towards that fan so that they can still watch and enjoy the game the way they always have. But now maybe there's this little tidbit that they can take out of it and say at the game next time, they can say to their friends, hey, look, they're in this trips formation and we're going to look out for this maybe instead. And it's just something basic, not too complex, but it's sort of a fun introduction to another side of the game, which is a side of the game I find really enjoyable. So I'm really happy to share that.
Yeah, and we'll do that. And another good point I'll say about what you're doing is I'm a little envious of what you do, because what you do isn't as stale dated as what we do, what David and I does. And David, I hope I'm not offending you.
No, not at all. Like, it's funny because when Ben, we're on a lot of the Argo Zoom calls, and listening to Ben ask Coach Dinwiddie questions about certain things he's doing as a coach, I just go, I'm not smart enough to be in this room right now, like, but it's a needed, because it's needed, because I actually get to learn a little bit into like the mind of what a different way to look at the game, because we're looking at what the players think and what the coaches, what the coach's game plan sort of is, but we don't get into like the analytics and the, as Ben kind of has in his title, the X's and O's of the game, how certain things are formed on the field, what exactly, like we can't really question the coach on those things because we don't know, because we don't have those expertise. So Ben, you bring a different perspective that I think is very much needed for this media team that we have here in Toronto.
Well, I
You know,
appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, watching the games now, I think I used to always suspect that sometimes you doubt people are watching what you're doing, but then certain things happen at a certain time, and then you go, oh, wait a second now. There's people watching. When I say people, I don't just mean the fans. You follow what I'm saying? So I think people will watch what you're saying because they like to say, oh, okay, so he's starting to get technical, right? So then you're getting those people, I think, Ben, that enjoy the technical side of the game as well. But I hear you when you say, you can't get in too deep without you got to kind of almost carry people in as opposed to drag them in, because they have to have a basis of what you're saying. But I think you have been picking up the way to sort of not assume that they know something, and then therefore define what you're talking about, like just like in a press conference when somebody says RPO. Okay, we can assume we know what that means, and a lot of people might not know what it means. You know enough to say, so run pass option. I'll go, oh, that's what he's talking about. So there's a lot of those traps that with what you do, right? Because we do it here too sometimes too, where we get technical, and we have to back up a little bit and support that technical jargon or technical idea with a little support on what exactly we mean. How big a challenge is that in knowing that when you're doing the show, all of a sudden you have to go, okay, wait a second now. I said that. Is that how it's changing for you? You're being more definitive and more, laying out the vocabulary so that people can understand, so you can carry them rather than drag them, into your world.
Some of the, well, where I struggle more, I don't struggle so much on the podcast with that, because we don't get overly technical on the podcast, and I feel like JB, my co-host, is pretty good at reminding me and breaking down, and sometimes I'll say something and then he'll follow up with a definition of what I'm talking about, or vice versa. Where I do struggle with it is on the film pieces I do, where I'll be explaining one concept and then suddenly I'll find that I've just used another term, and now I've got to explain that term, and then explaining that term, I've just dropped something else, and now I don't even know where I am. I'm like, which play was I even talking about here? So sometimes there's a lot of editing to do in some of those film pieces where I just have to go back to the beginning and say, maybe I should just call it this right off the start and not confuse anybody. So that's I guess where I found some difficulty with it.
One more for you, David, and then we'll move on with basically introducing him to the audience and having a conversation about football.
No, I mean, I think there's enough. I think what the current media landscape, whether it's the CFL or any league, has shown that there's more than enough room for different types of coverage, different things out there. So, some people might see certain outlets as competition, but I like the fact that now when I go to Argos practice, it's not just me and Frank. I have you there, Ben, Frank, when you come. TSN can be there. It's something like that gives this team, I think, it's not there yet, but a little more of the big league feel that it needs and is supposed to have. So it's always good to have more bodies in the scrums, because it gives you more of that big league feel to it.
And I like the camaraderie that exists there too. And it's something, I don't know if it's like this with other teams. I assume it is. I feel like the CFL generally is sort of like this, because you have people who genuinely love the game who are covering it. But I know for sure, like I'll get messages all the time from people that weren't maybe able to make it to the to the press conference or want to know what happened at practice. And therefore, I guess, technically competing places, but we don't really view it that way. So I'm happy to share if someone texts us, hey, what'd you see today? I'll tell them exactly what I saw, and hopefully it appears in their articles or in their podcasts or whatever it is, because I want the coverage. I am happy to see great Argos coverage, no matter who it comes from. And it could come from me, it could come from someone else. I'm just as happy.
All right, so let's get started. X's and O's. Here's my first question. My first question is, how have the X's and O's changed? I guess this is really more than one question, just by virtue of the pandemic and stuff, right? And you'll understand when I start to ask the question. My question is, how have the X's and O's changed? The trouble is, the trap there is, well, have the X's and O's changed, I guess, firstly, because of the pandemic?
You mean like just talking about what we see on the football field? Like, does it
Yeah.
look like a different product than before?
Yeah. Is there something that you identify from your expertise that you see teams doing differently, or notable things that they're doing that go, oh, okay, so we just spent 18 months away from the game, so they're doing this rather than that?
I haven't seen too much change. For the most part, it looks like what it looked like in 2019, which is just your sort of what it's been for about 10 years or so. What I have noticed, though, is, and I think a lot of people have noticed how low a lot of the scores are to start the year. And a lot of that is not so much X and O based, but it's preparation based. And I think that's what you get when you take out preseason and you add 2 years worth of rust. So you've got most of these teams where there are so many new pieces coming in. Football takes a long time to build chemistry. In a normal year, in a normal situation, the defense is always going to be well ahead of the offense because it takes longer on offense than it does on defense to get up to speed. This year, though, it's multiplied by who knows how much, because you've got not only the rust factor, that 2 years of rust and no preseason, but most of these teams are really unfamiliar with each other. You look at the Argonauts, look at the starting offense for the Argonauts. How many of those guys were starting in 2019? One, right? Jamal Campbell was the one starter from 2019 who carried over. Everyone else out there is new, and they're coming from different places. You've got a few that are from Calgary, but not everybody. So you've got John White coming in from BC. You've got Bladek and Blake coming from Saskatchewan. You've got our left tackle, John Allen, who was playing at Hawaii last time, and then a rookie in Peter Castro playing at the University of Calgary. Receivers from all over the place, Edmonton and Calgary, and from the States. And so you put all these guys together. In the best case scenario, it's going to take you like 5 or 6 games to start gelling. So to me, that's what I've noticed the most, is that the offenses have been fairly simple. We haven't seen a ton of complexity, a lot of adjustments, things that normally you would be seeing 4 games into the season. We're still at like preseason game 2 kind of level on the offense. And so the defenses are understandably ahead. But I think that's going to start to flatten out. So I know, and especially with sports betting, everyone's been talking about sports betting and bet the under, bet the under. I think that's probably a trend that's going to start changing in the next few weeks as the offenses finally get some chemistry and get up to speed.
Yeah, that is so true. David, the pandemic has caused changes. That's the kind of change that I've noticed as well. And it also has to do with the fact that, they say that you can't teach talent, but you can teach defense. And because you can teach defense, there's a book there on defense. With talent, it's like you said, it's the chemistry. It's how a quarterback interacts with a receiver and a running back and the offensive line. It's all about them getting together to do stuff. It seems like it would be the easier thing. You'd think offense would be the easier thing. You're the one that's deciding what the play is, but it is true. I think the opposite is true.
Well, and a lot of the offensive players couldn't really get the reps they needed last year, right? With everything closed, a lot of the Canadian receivers too, they didn't have anyone to throw a ball,
Absolutely.
throw a ball to them. I remember talking with Natea J, who's been on the program with us a few times. He just had to get his wife to just toss him a couple of footballs just to get the feel of catching a football. And, quarterbacks, they can throw a football, but to not have that timing and to know when to hit the receiver, and you're seeing I'm seeing a lot of that this year where quarterbacks are missing throws that generally they would not be missing, or receivers are dropping balls that should be caught. I mean, we see that every year, but you're seeing it more so this year, and a lot of drives ending in field goals. That's probably my biggest pet peeve this season. Field goal kickers have become the most important part, I think, of a team in the last few weeks. If you look at the last, 2 games of the CFL schedule this week, field goal kicking has been so crucial.
All the scoring.
Yeah, it's like if you're the CFL, I would be a little. I know they make for closer finishes and exciting finishes, but you want to get people a little more excited with touchdowns. Like fans want to come to football games to see touchdowns, big plays. They don't really come to see field goals unless it's those last minute field goals to either tie or win the game.
And I think that's something that will start opening up. Like I said, I think one of the big things that is missing that hasn't really happened yet is offensive coordinators allowing a bit more receiver and quarterback control. So like on any given play, we all know receivers are running routes. They've got a route they're assigned to run. But as teams get more and more comfortable, there'll be options off of those routes. And so, yes, they might have a post route, but if they get this look, it's actually going to turn into a quick out. If they get this look, it's going to turn into a slant. If they get this look, it'll turn into a dig. That's not something that you can just sort of say day one. All right, everyone, here's your responsibilities. It's way too much. Everyone's still trying to take in the terminology and still trying to get familiar with each other. So it may just be a post route right now. And so if the defense just happens to be in the right position for that, or the coverage is there, then there's not much you can do. And so now I think we'll start getting into, over the next few weeks, where there is that level of comfort. And the Argos being on this bye week, not that they were, obviously they've got this sort of impromptu bye week. They've taken the week off, but it never really works like that. There's still stuff going on. There's still comfort level stuff that's being escalated. Coaches certainly, like I guarantee you, Coach Dinwiddie did not. He probably tried for a couple of days, but he did not take the week off. And so, his brain's churning. He's got ideas. And I think when we come back on the field here, I think what you're going to see is a Toronto team that has probably escalated their level of complexity a little bit on the offensive side of the ball. You'll see things that we didn't see a couple of weeks ago, where guys are suddenly wide open, and we wonder why. And it's because of that. It's because of some of those read routes that they've got, some of those adjustments that the receivers can make, and the quarterbacks now know, I know what page you're on. I'm on the same page. There's the ball.
Yeah. We knew from the beginning, the coach said it from the beginning, that, of course, Arbuckle had more of an understanding of the playbook, right, than Macbeth, because he was involved in it. The other thing that's true as well is that Arbuckle has had a relationship with many of the receivers in Toronto that Macbeth hasn't had the chance to grow just yet. So I'm not surprised that that Arbuckle is doing well. And it won't surprise me that Macbeth might make it back in. As far as that's concerned, there is that advantage, right, that Arbuckle had, that, David was referring to all these new people, right, on the team. And you just talked about one player, Campbell, on the offense. That can erase a little bit of that. He might have a little bit of an advantage there.
Oh, for sure. Just to the rapport that he has with Eric Rogers and Joan Breskus and even Tavares to an extent. Tavares was in Calgary, I guess, during Arbuckle's first year. So they would have at least worked together to some degree. And they also know the system a little bit. So, something that I thought was interesting, just talking to Joan Breskus in the offseason, he'd mentioned one day that he and Tavares and Antonio Pipkin went out to a local high school to chuck the ball around. And what I found interesting in that conversation is that he said that a lot of the teaching it was him. Usually things are quarterback led, but in that case, it's him who knows the system. And Antonio's coming to a new system. It wasn't something he was familiar with. So here you've got the receiver sort of leading and saying, well, this is what coach wants us doing at the top of our break. This is how we're actually going to read. When we run this route, we're going to do it this way. And so you as a quarterback have to do it this way. And so the more guys that are on that same sort of Calgary page, it's going to be a little less work for them. The problem is you can't move ahead with half the team, right? So you can't. So you've got Arbuckle, Rogers, Breskus, and maybe Daniels, but you can't. And actually Braverman too. He spent some time in Calgary, But you can't just say, okay, these guys know it. Let's go ahead and let's really open things up. It doesn't really work like that. They can help, and they can certainly expedite the process by having some of that player-to-player coaching. And I'm sure you guys have seen at practice. That's one thing this team is excellent at. It's not just the coaches out there coaching. After every snap, you see players get together. It'll be two DBs that get together, two receivers that get together, and they talk about it. There's this great communication where they're trying to make each other better. And that is, I think, something that's going to help. So I don't know if it's really, I was going to say we haven't seen it yet. We have seen it, because like we even saw in that last game. And I think, David, you mentioned it sitting beside me. It was no coincidence who Arbuckle was going to early on. It was, Rogers, Tavares, because those are the guys he's comfortable with. So we do see that. But I think as the whole team kind of catches up, I think that's where you're going to see that the level of play really increase. But no, for sure, Frank, there's, back to your original question, I've gone off on 3 different tangents, but back to your original question, yeah, it's an advantage. And I expect McLeod Bethel Thompson will improve throughout the year. And we probably haven't seen the last of him either. We know what the CFL is like. You'll just, look at what Calgary has been going through. You need 2 quarterbacks. And Coach Dinwiddie said right from the get-go, I have 2 starting quarterbacks because I need 2 starting quarterbacks. And there's a pretty good chance we're not done with McLeod Bethel Thompson yet. At some point, he's going to be back in, and I bet you, like you said, he looks a lot better than he did.
There's a lot of time, David, while he's holding the clipboard that he can, through, like, playbooks are great. I don't know if I'm not a coach, but I'll just assume this. Playbooks are like a book, right? They're just a bunch of words and drawings. When it comes to life, when you see it in life, then you learn even more. It's much easier to understand the playbook when you see it in action. And that's what happens for Macbeth. He'll get much better as he sees the game situation, because what we do know about practice is, minus contact, it's not really preparing for football.
He did get some of those reps with the playbook when they did their scrimmage games. So
yep,
he got to see some of it, but
in live action with the hitting, David, and that kind of stuff,
there's things
a little different.
It is, and the nerves kind of get you a little bit too. Like, those are things that the playbook doesn't teach you, is how to deal with. If you get a little too excited over throwing a receiver, or you see a defensive player pop up in the middle of the field, then that kind of takes away from your concentration. Like, those are little things that the playbook doesn't prepare you for. And at the same time, with a new quarterback, a coach is not exactly going to open up the playbook completely right off the hop. They want them to execute the certain plays that they believe will give the quarterback the most success. And then when they're able to master those plays, they'll open it up a little bit more. And I feel like Dinwiddie may not have opened it up right away. He's taken some, he's said that, some of the play calling wasn't the greatest on his part, and he's taken ownership of that. And I do feel like there was a bit of a difference between the plays being called for McLeod and for Arbuckle. But that's just a comfort level on the coaching part as well. That's something, again, that you have to anticipate when you're on the field and in certain situations.
And he talked about that a little bit during training camp. I remember asking him about the difference in having quarterbacks with different skill sets. I think my question was, and what I was trying to dig at is, I was trying to find out, I guess, how many quarterbacks they were trying to keep, and what the order was going to be. But my question was about, would you rather have quarterbacks with similar skill sets or different skill sets? And his answer was that he views every quarterback as having a different skill set. There's just, in his mind, no such thing as 2 quarterbacks that are exactly the same. And so he acknowledged that he calls very different plays for McLeod than he does for Nick, because they have different strengths. And you see that. It's pretty noticeable. You look back at that Calgary game and you see that the plays that were called for McLeod Bethel Thompson, there was a lot more stuff that was happening downfield, which McLeod really likes. He's got that cannon of an arm, and so there were more options for him. And whereas with Nick Arbuckle, it tended to be that the shorter stuff that he likes picking away at, and then those occasional deep shots. But you notice the comfort level between the two. When you watch Arbuckle play, you see right away he knows what to do immediately. There's not time. You never see Arbuckle back there in the pocket uncertain as to what to do next, whereas you did see that a little bit with McLeod Bethel Thompson in that first game in 3 quarters, where he kind of got back there and then tried to sort of figure it out, whereas pre-snap, Arbuckle recognizes what he's seeing. He knows, okay, it's this coverage, I go here. It's this coverage, I go here.
So was part of what happened with Bethel, with Macbeth in the second game, was it partially because the coaching changed and maybe I want to say trusted him to make some changes in the plan, and then he just kind of lost, what he was going to do, even though in that game, really a couple of the mistakes that were made that he looked bad at were receivers not running the route the way it's intended.
Yeah, and it's tough to say, like from an outside point of view, we can never know for sure. It's hard to gauge sometimes who's at fault. It did look like on a couple of those missed passes, like receivers had sort of rounded off routes, but we never really know the way that it has, been coached to them and what they've been asked to do. What I saw in that Winnipeg game, what sort of led to the decline of McLeod's play in that Winnipeg game, they were getting home with just sending 4 men. And so it made it really tough on McLeod Bethel Thompson. Again, not having that instant recognition that Arbuckle has with the system. When they're rushing 4, it means there's 8 guys back in coverage. And, you've got your 5 receivers out there, 8 guys covering them. And for him, he only had 2 seconds to get rid of that football. And he didn't have that sort of immediate, I know exactly where I need to go here. This receiver is going to make this side adjustment because of the coverage. I'm going to go here. Whereas Arbuckle in that first drive that you saw of his, right away, they were doing the same thing. It wasn't a different defense that Winnipeg was playing. They were still just rushing 4 largely at Arbuckle, but he recognized right away, I do this. I know Eric Rogers is going to make that adjustment here, and there's the football. And it's tough. Like any level of football, if you can just rush 4 and get pressure on the quarterback almost immediately, it's going to be tough for anybody. It's not like, Arbuckle had a great game in Winnipeg. He struggled too. But I think that first drive showed you a glimpse of, what he could do. And then with a full week preparation, we saw that come to fruition in the rematch.
That's the way I saw it. It wasn't so much that the Argo receivers made. Remember you were saying how the receivers were teaching quarterbacks, how the receivers understand the game, and they were teaching other players how to deal with it. Maybe also there's also that thing where there's body language, and it's body language that they assume Macbeth understands, that Arbuckle actually understands and can flow with them, right? Because even though you're running a route, a lot of times the route might change. You mentioned it, and that's the point I was trying to get at, is the subtle changes that a receiver makes in a route. A quarterback that's played with them for a while can see the tip of the hand, that the receiver's trying to avoid the defense seeing.
For sure. So like on, let's say there's a choice route where a receiver at let's say 7 yards is going to make a decision to either break left or break right. They've learned throughout all of camp or whatever it is, when I see the defender do this, I break left. When I see the defender do this, I break right, or sometimes I just stop. If the quarterback's not seeing it the same way, they haven't been in the system for as long, then absolutely there are going to be those misses where suddenly, and we see it all the time in football, suddenly a quarterback throws and there's nobody close, and people in the stands are like, where is he going? Where's he throwing that ball? But it's because he read it one way and the receiver read it a different way. And it's sometimes hard for us up in the press box to know who was right and who was wrong. The answer is usually the person that's been in the system longer is right, and the one who's newer to the system is wrong. A great example of this, and I don't expect a lot of people watched this last night, but the fourth quarter of the Atlanta Falcons game last night against the Cleveland Browns, you had Josh Rosen, who's brand new to Atlanta. He's a great quarterback. He was a great college quarterback, just arrived in Atlanta, and he was missing things all over the place where there was no receiver anywhere near. But it's not because he doesn't know how to throw a football. It's because in his mind, he read it one way. He saw, if I see this defense, he must be breaking out. But he's only been there for a few days, and you saw what a mess it was. So I thought that was exactly what we're talking about coming to life here.
Absolutely right, David. I mean, that's why the repetition is so important that you referred to earlier.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much practice, and in practice, there's no contact. So players have to also deal with contact as part of how they're going to play off of a guy trying to hit them. Where in practice, right, you're not thinking about a guy trying to hit you. Well, it's just by accident. Accidents do happen, but I feel like that's something that players also have to kind of think about when they're, do I go for this ball up the middle with a defender coming and trying. Like we saw it with Tavares, that play by Tavares. You know, that play might look differently in practice, but unfortunately, he got caught with the blindside hit, and like those are things you have to kind of, as a player, kind of have to think about when you're going for certain plays as well.
Absolutely. Let me be specific about. Can we talk, Ben, about the games that were played this week in the Canadian Football League?
For sure, anything.
Oh, okay, all right. So in week 4, game 1, this one's easy. The game was postponed. How do you see this affecting the Toronto Argonauts? You alluded to it a little bit. The positive and negative for both teams, Toronto and Edmonton, when it comes to X's and O's, or just your opinion?
Yeah, I think I'm not a big fan personally of early bye weeks. I feel like ideally you want your bye weeks to happen sort of more mid-season. Now it's a short season, so I guess it's not that early. But and having an unexpected bye week is also not ideal because there are always things that coaches have sort of planned in. Like they know exactly what's going to be going on throughout the whole year. They've planned it out. They've got every day they know exactly what's going to be going on. And so to suddenly throw this wrench into their plans, it does make a bit of a mess of things. Now they'll adjust, they'll adapt to it. What I'm hoping is that, because obviously Toronto's not going to have they're not going to have 2 more buys. They're only going to have 1 more. And as it currently is scheduled, they've got to buy the last week of the season. I'm hoping that's the one that is now lost. So I'm hoping that they keep the sort of middle buy that they've got, and they get rid of the one that was at the end of the year, because it's going to be a long stretch now if the Argos aren't going to have another bye week until the very last week of the season. That's something that I think could be an issue.
Okay, I want to interrupt what we're talking about now. Joining us now, Marshall, how you doing?
I'm good. It's good to hear you guys, and chucking away on Argos bye weeks, all the hot topics.
Our executive producer forgot to mention to our producer that you were coming in, so I apologize for that. I truly do. Listen, guys, I just wanted to have him in because I wanted to congratulate him. Marshall did his first play-by-play on TSN, and I wanted to say this, and we have Ben Grant and David Morassutti are with us, Marshall.
Yeah.
And we're talking about X's and O's, and when I wanted to congratulate you on doing what you did a great job, was the question of, I know that Rod Smith used to play college football. You were a quarterback in college football. It's not normal. I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but it's not usual that players become the play-by-play guy. Usually they become the color guy. Tell us about your position and how you grew into being the play-by-play guy.
Yeah, I think when I finished playing football in university, I was given an opportunity by TSN 1150 in Hamilton right away to start calling McMaster Marauders football games, and I fell in love with doing play-by-play. And it's one of those things that you don't realize that you enjoy the concept of it until you really get some reps. And for me, I love the color analysis. I love being able to break down and analyze everything that's happening in the game, but I kind of knew early on that my true connection to the game was using my passion, my love for Canadian football, and being able to, yes, paint around the edges a little bit of the play of, hey, here's what I saw, and then throw it to the people that are actually smarter than me about this stuff. But being able to give some analysis from a play-by-play perspective and weave those things together into a seamless broadcast, I think is hopefully one of my skill sets that I'll be able to use for a long time moving forward. And it's, play-by-play, I think, is a constant growth process, and you're always learning new ways to do things and new descriptors and how to get in and out smoothly and throw to the sidelines and come back and go to break and all these different things, because you are the quarterback of the broadcast. And I really enjoy that aspect of it as well. So it's just a bit of a circus, honestly, that you get a little bit of everything. It all gets thrown at you, and then you hope that you figure it out on the fly. And part of ex-players becoming, whether it's play-by-play, color analysts, in studio, any of that stuff, is that we miss the rush. We miss the idea of the adrenaline going up and feeling alive, and game day still feels like game day. And I was talking to TJ about that with the Argos broadcast in their home opener in week 3, where he said, I woke up today really happy because I'm actually excited that it's game day, but I know I won't hurt tomorrow. I'm like, yes, you are. You get it. This is the upside of being in the media. We walk around wearing golf shirts and talk about the game and never get hit by a 300-pounder. So it's been a joy to learn, and a long way to go, honestly, for me. There's a lot of things I want to work on and get better at, and to be given the opportunity to do that with live reps on television is a blessing, and I hope that I can prove the people that have given me the opportunity wise for their decision.
Well, it's too bad. Nate is scheduled. He was scheduled to be here today, and he's scheduled to be here from time to time on our program. I would have liked to have had both of you talk about that. I promised you I wouldn't take much of your time. If you need to go, I understand.
All good.
I really appreciate you taking this time. I just wanted to personally congratulate you. You're a friend of the show. You're also a very amicable person who's been very kind. Ben was talking about, Ben earlier was talking about how the people around the teams, the media types, whether it's us or other people, newspapers, television, there's a real camaraderie. So I just wanted to make sure that we express that with you here today.
No, thank you. I appreciate that, guys. And I love what all of you are doing around the Argonauts. And, they've got a really exciting team. I was actually just on TSN 1050 in Toronto with Jim Taddy, and I was kind of talking to him about setting up very early days, what Hamilton Toronto is going to look like in these next 2 weeks. And it really, in a condensed season, it crystallizes just how important having home field might be in a year where Toronto would love nothing more than to ruin Hamilton trying to get to a Grey Cup at home. Would love nothing more than to stick it to the Argos back-to-back and start to cruise through the East Division and make their way towards the East Final at home towards a Grey Cup. So, the idea of you guys being able to give consistent coverage to that, I think, is crucial to everybody around the CFL. And it is, the fans always talk on social media about the CFL family and how enjoyable it is to be around the people from other teams. And I love chatting with Danny Austin in Calgary. And I saw Julio Caravata this weekend when I was in Ottawa. It's the first time I've seen him in over 2 years. And it's just like, it's so nice to see the people around this league, because I don't know if you guys have noticed, there's not a lot of bad human beings that are around the Canadian Football League, because it's just a unique, special group of people at a lot of different factions of the media, into the team building, into the players. And I mean, I got direct, this is something that, I don't think you'll ever hear from another league. The most important player on the team is the quarterback, okay, regardless of whatever anybody else thinks. And I got a direct message, a text, or an email from over half of the starting quarterbacks in the CFL after the call on Saturday. And the idea that you would have that many of them, they don't need to give a damn that I'm calling the game. It doesn't change their lives. Most of them weren't even involved in the game. But to get messages from them of saying, hey, that was really fun. We watched back the game and we really enjoyed what you did. I don't think Tom Brady's reaching out to the first-time play-by-play guy that's business and saying, hey, man, congratulations. That was really cool. And I had a great conversation with Michael Riley as well on Thursday of last week going in, where our producer, Chris Edwards extraordinaire, said, it's his first play-by-play call. And Michael Riley goes, really? Well, you know what? Don't let the heart rate get too high, Marshall, and make sure you're relaxed and settle in. And he started to, kind of coach me through it. And I was like, I can't believe Michael Riley, a legend, a future Hall of Famer, a two-time Grey Cup champion, is telling me leading into my first game, here's how you do it, kid. Don't worry. I got you. I'll take care of you while I'm down on the field doing my thing and you're up in the booth sweating. So it's just, it's such a great league to be around, because people like yourself and Riley in the front offices, it's just everybody wants to see the league prosper. And that commonality, I think, is really unique.
There's so much I want to say, but I'm biting my tongue. All right, Ben, I said to him, we'd only ask him that question. So you're taking your life. No, you're not taking. Can he ask you a question, Marshall?
Anything for Ben.
Appreciate that, Marshall.
There you go.
So I just wanted to know, you talked about after the run through that you did, the dry run through in the Toronto game, you talked about needing to find different ways to transition. That was one thing that stood out, is, okay, you need to find different ways to say the same thing, because it is, football is a repetitive game. You keep going through the same things, going to commercial break, coming back. What was one thing that stood out from this particular game where you thought at the end of it, I think I'm going to really need to focus on this part?
Maybe saying the name of the team who actually scored the touchdown would help.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Calgary.
I waited the entire damn game. I waited to call a touchdown. I'm going to get on SportsCenter. I'm going to have maybe it's a Brian Burnham Catch of the Year candidate, and it runs on SportsCenter and top 50 shows for the next 10 years. Javon Cotoy gets into the end zone, and for some reason I blurted out something, Red Blacks. So I think that would be nice to solve going into my next game. But no, in all seriousness, the thing that jumped out to me was working with Dwayne Ford and how he's able to adapt to your style so quickly. But we got so comfortable by the third quarter. It felt like I've been doing games with Dwayne for 30 years, Ben, where we're so relaxed that I actually had to, in the first quarter, I'm really timid and stiff. And by the third quarter, I basically was in a lazy boy sitting back with a beer. And I realized about start of the third quarter, middle of the third, I'm like, okay, we are on national television. I'm like, it's nice to have a relaxed conversation to make people feel at home, but we do need to make sure that this production is honoring the amount of people that are being able to consume it right now. So yeah, the constant balance of energy and attention to detail and letting things be free flowing. It's an art more than a science, which is a good thing because I was awful at math and science, but I do enjoy that balancing act. And I don't know if there's ever a perfect balance, but the effort to find the balance for that specific day and that specific game is a really, really fun endeavor.
And you guys were great together. There was such a wonderful chemistry between you two. It did seem like that, as a viewer. I remember thinking to myself about the third quarter. I'm like, these guys act like they've been calling games together for years.
Yeah, it was unique for sure. But again, Dwayne is. I feel like it's a shame that people don't know the full personality of Dwayne Ford, because who you see is the big man who gets on the prompter and tells you the plays, and he's, here's a guy and tells you about their background and where they came from and where their families. And then the second that the third quarter ends and we're about to go on camera to give you the stats of the quarter, he's salsa dancing. He's wandering around looking for his button that dropped off his jacket somewhere. He's blaming the producers for trying to steal his button from his. I mean, it's like, it's a comedy show, and then the camera snaps on, and he's football Dwayne with lots of personality, but it's not the uncut version. So him being that raw and natural with me, even in the moments where we're not doing the game, it allows you to settle in so quickly. So I couldn't have asked for a better setup. Chris Edwards, as I say, was in my ear the whole game, runs that ship as well as anybody in Canada for live sporting events. And then you got Dwayne doing his shenanigans, and then Shinetti down on the sideline, who was hyping me up before the game began. About 2 minutes before we went to air, he's yelling at me through his microphone on the sidelines, trying to get me going. So it's a really, really fun group, and I hope people appreciate the fact that it's great to suggest things that you want to see on the CFL and TSN. I know I've done this in the past where I want more spider cam, or I want to be able to get more mic'd up quarterback things, or we're always pushing for innovation, and that's a good thing. But also, I think we should appreciate how good the quality is, because the people that work in the backgrounds, man, it's a well-oiled machine that I just happen to get lucky and get dropped into the middle of.
I wanted to ask you, this isn't a question, so this is just information. Now, you've already got your schedule of what games you're going to do. Which is your next game? I don't count this as a question, so I'm not really asking a question.
That's okay. So September 24th, I've got Montreal at Toronto, which I'm extremely excited for, because I didn't have very many vertical passing plays in the game BC Ottawa, whether it was because of Matt Nichols' arm maybe not feeling the greatest, or the wet ball that we had there in Ottawa. But Montreal appears to just not give a damn about what everybody else in the league is doing. They're just going to throw the ball 40 yards once every 2-3 plays. So I'm really excited for that one. And then I've got another Argos home game against Ottawa as well on Wednesday, October 6th. So we've got primetime football in October, which I'm excited for, to be kind of like the lone football broadcast going on across North America at that point for people to enjoy. So that's the two that I know about for now. And fingers crossed that the important people at TSN want me to do some more.
Well, you did a great job. Again, congratulations. You've always been, we only got a couple of minutes left, so I guess you're finishing the show with us. The thing that I like so much, and it speaks to the loyalty of the people within the Canadian Football League. It's no secret that Hamilton doesn't have a radio station anymore. It must feel good to know that you still have a place to do what you love, and people made room for you. That's my perspective. I have no reason to suggest it other than how I feel about the Canadian Football League and understanding the tough situation that you went through. I'm not suggesting it was tough for you, but from the perspective that I looked at.
Yeah, it was tough, honestly, Frank. It was, when you love doing something and it gets taken away from you very suddenly, I think that's difficult for anybody to cope with. It doesn't matter what your line of work is. And, for me, I was a UPS delivery driver for the last 6 months. I was unloading planes at the Hamilton airport at 3 a.m. because I got an 11-month-old son, right? And I got a fiance, and there's just, you got to make money. You got to find a way. And, I went through about 6 months of battling uphill and hoping that something good would happen. And as I say, it gave me great perspective on how fortunate I am to be a part of all of this at this point, and to get to be around the game that we love and that Canadians love as well. And being able to bring those things full circle is, it means more to me now than it ever has.
See, guys, we started this conversation. I asked the both of you, what did you do? What brings you here? How much do you love the CFL? We talked all about what you weren't here. you weren't here, Marshall, but you just echoed everything these two said, and in fact, even what I said at the beginning of the program. So we've gone in a complete circle. So I appreciate your contribution. I truly do.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me, and looking forward to Labor Day and the rematch and all the rest. It's going to be a wild ride for the next 12 weeks or so.
I may not know. I don't know yet if I'll be there. They're finding out the Ticats are figuring out whether there's room for me. They'd like to make room for me, but I understand, with all the stuff that we've got going on, not everybody can be where they want to be. The one thing I do know, just 10 seconds, David and Ben.
No, I'm looking forward to Labor Day. This is something that's circled on the calendar every year, and I'm hoping the Argos and Ticats provide a very competitive game. In some past years, it hasn't been competitive, especially for the Argos. So I'm hoping for a competitive game, especially considering how wide open I feel the East is this year.
It's going to be a great football game.
It definitely is going to be a great football. Again, Marshall Ferguson, thank you for joining us. Of course, for Ben Grant and David Grant, Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you for watching. I'm Candid Frank.